Hello and welcome to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. I'm Emma, a mama of 2 girls, an ex-nursery practitioner and the creator of the Non-Perfect Parents Club. The Non-Perfect Parents Club is all about support, honesty, truths, acknowledging that none of us can be perfect parents because it's impossible, and basically just speaking the unspoken. The only rule here is no judgment allowed. I love hearing people's stories. I love finding out about other parents, their family dynamics, their values and how they tick. So that is what this podcast is going to be. Some great honest conversations about parenting, hopefully delving into some nitty-gritty thoughts and feelings that will make us all laugh, cry and sigh a big sigh of relief. This episode is brought to you in collaboration with Amazing Graze, who create Graze boxes and party food for the Lancaster and Morecambe and surrounding areas. I can vouch for how delicious their Graze tables are after they provided the most beautiful one for my recent podcast celebration. Head across to Facebook, search Amazing Graze and give them a like. Hello and welcome back to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. Today I'm joined by Wendy. Hi Wendy and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family dynamic and any heritage.
Hi. I'm one of 2 siblings. I'm the eldest. My parents divorced when I was 13. My brother's 4 years younger than me. My mum passed away 6 years ago. I've got 3 of my own children. And I divorced 12 years ago. So, yeah, it's very strange dynamics.
I'm sure we'll get into a bit more of that maybe. Yeah. The main rule of the Non-Perfect Parents Club is no judgment allowed. Have you ever felt judged in your parenting and can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I have. And it's quite raw still to think about it, really. And it was mainly after my divorce. Mm-hmm. It was really difficult co-parenting with somebody that wasn't on the same page as me. And I felt very judged a lot of the time, but it didn't just come from him. It came from a lot of other people, professionals as well.
Right.
So my middle son was diagnosed at 7 with ADHD,
right, and
at 14 with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings its own challenges when you're a 2-parent family, but when you're a 1-parent family, and you don't have that backup support from the other parent, it's really, really difficult. And a lot of the time Elliot's behaviour was very challenging.
Yeah.
He was quite aggressive, 100 miles an hour, and it was just a really difficult time, and it took its toll. But as far as being judged, a lot of the time, because family members didn't understand him either. It was my parenting that was the problem. Right. But that was two professionals as well. Because I don't think a lot of schools now, I think they're getting better, but back then, which isn't that long ago, Elliot's 20 now, but the lack of understanding of these children is incredible, really. So yeah, it does. I'm coming from a background in education myself as well. I know how a lot of the staff think about these neurodiverse children. So yeah, I was judged, or I felt I was judged. Probably if we were to ask all of those individuals, they would say that they weren't judging me, but I felt very judged a lot of the time. Because the finger was pointed at me that you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I was literally juggling so many balls at that time, and not coping very well either, because I didn't really have the support system in place that I needed.
So is that how you kind of felt it was, and they were basically saying there was things that you were or weren't doing that weren't helping.
Yeah, it was mainly the things that I wasn't doing. So with Elliot, he was very complex in his behaviour, and the strategies that I was using for a typical child with autism didn't seem to be working. And at that time we had a lot of outside agencies that were working alongside us to offer support, which was great. And I was taking any support that was given to me, by the way. And I remember one of the outreach workers in her little report, when it came to the end, because you want to get a block of so many sessions with them, but when it came to the end, she reported back that she didn't feel that I was following the guidance, the information that they'd been given. Wow. To enable me then to support Elliot the best way that I could. And it was really frustrating, because I thought I'm doing everything that I know that I should be doing here. And in the end, because this went on for many years, his whole school life really. In the end, I thought there's something that I've missed here, because I am following all these typical strategies. And I started to look into other types of autism. People will probably think, well, there is only one type of autism, but there's something called, I don't even like saying the name of it because it sounds awful. It's PDA, pathological demand avoidance, and it's like an arm of autism. And I started to do some reading up on this, and I thought, oh my God, he ticks all of these boxes. And I tried to speak to school about it, and they weren't accommodating at all, because Lancashire don't recognise it. So you would never get a diagnosis in Lancashire for this. It's a postcode lottery, basically. Anyway, because I did truly believe that he fell into these traits, I found a course in Liverpool that was being run, a 2-day course, and I went, I booked myself on it. I had to pay for it myself, which was no problem, because I felt that I needed to go to find out a bit more about it and see if I could pick up some helpful strategies to use. And I did, and it was amazing. And I was the only parent there with a child that was in high school education. All the other parents had children that were in primary school. So a lot of my questions were quite difficult to answer, because it's still only quite a new diagnosis. So, and even when I went back to school with all this information, they still weren't interested in using strategies that would support him in school.
Right. So you've kind of had then, so was there like an equal split in terms of co-parenting, or I'm only asking that because was he with you like most of the time, or was it an equal split? Like, was it you dealing with the majority of?
No, it was me that was dealing with the majority of the parenting, really.
So you've got like school who aren't supporting. There's 3 different environments there, isn't there? So that must have been really hard to manage.
It was really hard, because a lot of the time I felt like I was completely on my own, and I felt that nobody was listening to me. And I understand that, you know, when you don't you've got no comprehension of something, you don't really understand it, it's difficult to get your head around things. But and as a parent, as a mum to a child that is neurodiverse, you have to change everything. And your life changes when you become a mum anyway, regardless of anything else. But then when you find out that your child has got these extra difficulties, it just changes everything. And it was really, really hard because, you know, you can't, something as simple as going to the supermarket is, or was really difficult. And I didn't really understand it at the time. And it took me a long time to get my head around it. Probably because I was listening a lot to my own parents' viewpoints of parenting. You should be doing this, you should be doing that. Don't let him do that, don't let him do this. And now, years on, when I look back at it, I realise that I was parenting like my parents parented, which wasn't great because one parent was very strict and dominant and the other parent was very soft and you know, just let us get away with everything basically. So we never really knew as kids where we stood with them because it was quite mixed up. But I was parenting like the both of them until, you know, I had to really look at myself and how I was as a parent, because I couldn't have carried on the way that I did do. It did result in me having a breakdown. The pressure of everything, when it was at its worst, I just got to the point where I hit a brick wall and I couldn't continue anymore. So that made me reflect and once again had to change everything to accommodate it all.
How do you feel about parenting? Good, bad? Has it changed you? Any regrets?
Well, it has changed me hugely. I've got lots of regrets because of what I've just been saying. There's things that I wish that I'd done differently a lot sooner, but I can't change it. It's the way that it was, and you know, I can't keep going back on things. I don't really know what else I can say about that, really.
Do you think you're a good parent?
I do now. I didn't, because of how judged I felt. I did really question myself a lot, but I do think I'm a good. I do believe that I'm a good parent now, and particularly when Elliot, the middle one, the one that's caused me the most stress, turns around and tells me that I'm the best parent. That's you know, that speaks a lot, and he's come on leaps and bounds, and I'm really proud of him. So
Is there anything in your life that has shaped how you parent that you're happy to talk about? Any situations or circumstances that have affected this?
I think we've covered it really with what we've already said with you know, about being a parent of an autistic child. His younger brother, he hasn't got a diagnosis yet, but he's showing all the signs of being on the spectrum too. But I feel much more able to manage him now because of everything that I experienced with Elliot. So that it is completely shaped who I am today, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for Elliot. So in a lot of ways, I've got a lot to thank him for, even though it was really, really tough. And it was tough because it resulted in me having a breakdown that I was off work for 6 months, and I ended up making the decision to leave that role. And handed my notice in, and that's how my business started. So and I couldn't be any happier than I am now, and I think it was the very best decision to make for all of us as a little family unit, because at the time I was able to give Elliot as much of my time as I could and work it around you know, what I was doing from home, working from home. And it just seemed to be, at that time, the very best thing that we could do. But, you know, now I can't imagine going out to work for anybody else. It's the best thing that I ever did. Yeah, and I think the kids would probably agree with that as well. I mean, there's been times when it's not been great, and you know, you get quite stressed because you know, you're inviting clients into your home, and you're asking them to just, you know, tread carefully, don't stand on the Lego, and you know, I'm sorry if the toilet's not being flushed, or you know, all that kind of thing. But we're a bit over that now because they're getting older.
Yeah.
And they are very respectful of the fact that I do work from home, because they understand that it's my job, and you know, it's keeping the roof over their head.
Yeah.
So I think they've learned a lot alongside me with me doing that as well, which has been great. Yeah.
How have you found it? Because a lot of people that I speak to, they always mention obviously like the teen years and the teen stage. How did you find navigating that?
Oh, it's awful. It still is. Yeah, I've got over it twice. Not so much the first time, because my eldest son Adam, he went to live with his dad when he was 12. So I do feel I missed out on a lot of his teen years for various different reasons. With Elliot, that was at the point when he was 14 when he got his diagnosis of autism, which was far too late.
Yeah.
And that's just how bad the pathway system is. I don't know whether it'll ever change, but you know, to be 14 and then be told that you've got autism is really difficult, because you're navigating all the changes in your body. You know, you're going through puberty, and to be told that you're different too. You know, he knew that he was different anyway. He could feel it, and that was part of the problems that we had. But it did get worse for a lot of the time, and trying to work out as well as a parent what is just teen stuff and what is actually the autism. That was quite tricky, and still is, because Joshua is now 14, my youngest, and he's been about a good 12 months that he's been going through puberty. So it's very different to Elliot though, because they do display very different traits, but because we're all individuals, aren't we? We're all unique, so that every one of them's got their own little different quirks and everything. But it was awful. I mean, it's just, I've got a lot of friends that have got kids that are going through the teen years now, and one of them in particular, she's only got one of her own child, and she said to me, "Why did you not tell me about this?" And I said, "Well, you wouldn't have listened, but we wouldn't. Nobody, you know, you're not. Even if you warned about becoming a parent and what it's like and how difficult it is, it never prepares you until you experience it yourself." I don't
think you can truly appreciate it until you're in the thick of that moment, can you?
No. No, you can't. And everybody's experience is different as well, isn't it? So some people fly through it, and you know, they don't have any problems with the children at all, or the teens, and come out of it the other side still smiling, and others of us without literally pulling our hair out. I have to say, this time up to now, touch wood, it's not been as stressful as it was with Elliot, but it's just it's an experience, and I try and reflect a lot about what I was like as a teen. It's made me look back and think, you know, was my mum thinking about all of these kinds of things when I was that age? I think one of the things that I found most difficult, because I've got boys, and Dad isn't as active parenting, is talking about the changes through puberty, because boys don't want to talk about anything, never mind what's happening with their bodies, and you know, when girls come on the scene, and all of that stuff that comes with it, and even though I'm quite willing to talk to them, it's they just don't want to go there either. So that's quite difficult navigating that, because I don't want them to feel embarrassed that they can never come to me for anything. But at the same time, I don't. I feel that we need to keep some open communication as well without embarrassing them too much. Like, oh, Mum, don't talk to me about that.
So you said about your older son went to live with his dad. How did that make you feel as a parent? Were you expecting that to happen, or?
No, I wasn't expecting it to happen, and it was awful, and it happened very, very quickly, and it was probably at the time when Elliot's behaviour was its worst, really, and because having Adam hasn't got any specific disabilities, and he's quite quiet and introvert, whereas with Elliot, he was very outspoken. He was very verbal and loud, and there's only 16 months between them, so they're quite close in age, and for them growing up, Adam really found it difficult to cope with Elliot, and as he got older, he found it more and more difficult to cope with it. You know, I liked it nice and quiet and peaceful, and Elliot wasn't like that at all. So no, it happened very, very quickly without any notice whatsoever. It wasn't a nice experience, and I felt like I'd lost a major part of me body, like a limb, or my heart was completely broken because of the circumstances, and my relationship with him, his relationship with me, suffered hugely, and it took a long, long time, and I'm like talking about years to rectify that. We're good now, but it's been a difficult road with him. So, you know, whenever I'm sat here talking about this and the things that you don't think about, because I was dealing with all of that, but also having to deal with the heartbreak of my eldest son not being with me as well. And I know that I have thought about that before, but I've not really, you know, talked about it. It's quite it tugs at my heartstrings again, really. But we are good now, and the great thing is that they are good as well, which is that means more to me than anything, that they're okay with each other. They get on, they're good mates, they spend a lot of time together, so that's good.
What is your biggest value when it comes to parenting?
I think probably mutual respect. I grew up, and probably a lot of people will resonate with this as well. My the way that I was brought up by my parents was that it was kind of like a case of you know, children are seen and not heard. You do as you're told. And that kind of parenting. And as I said earlier, I did begin to parent like that when the boys were much younger, but I now realise that it's really, really important for them to feel seen and heard, and have that respect, and me not to just dictate to them that you're doing this, and you know, there's no questions about it, or don't argue with me or anything like that. I learnt that the hard way, so that's probably the biggest thing for me, really.
What has been your biggest challenge so far?
Parenting neurodiverse children. It's got to be. I can't. I'm sure that there'll be lots of parents out there that feel this and feel alone and judged. And at some points tearing the hair out, not knowing what to do for the best. It comes with so many stresses. You know, a big thing with it is the school relationship. the mainstream schools aren't cut out to support children that are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge in itself, because you feel that you're constantly having to fight your children's corner. You're constantly having to be their voice. You're constantly having to go into school to sort things out, and you do that anyway with any child, but it seems to be heightened when you've got a child that needs extra support. And it's frustrating as well, because gosh, I could write a book on some of the experiences that I've had with schools and education, and that's probably for a whole other discussion. But
it can be really hard to advocate for your children as well. That kind of, I find with a lot of people I speak to, that especially with schools, we're kind of conditioned to think schools and teachers are right. What they do and say is thing, and you should all respect that. But there is some, circumstances, situations where they're not, and I find that a lot of parents really struggle to kind of advocate for the children, and sometimes they don't always say stuff, they just let it go on. So I imagine with like a neurodiverse child as well, it's even harder to do that, especially like in your situation where professionals were telling you that it was you.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I had 10 years working in the education system myself in primary school, and I worked in a pastoral role. Yeah. At the time when I actually left that role, and my job was to bridge the gap to learning with children that were struggling to come into school or stay in class, for lots of different reasons. And it isn't just a lot. What I found in that role was that a lot of the teaching staff didn't have an understanding of where that child was. And it can be for lots of different reasons. So it could be something that's gone on at home, and it could be something really, really simple that affects that child. So for instance, it could have been something like, mum and dad had a bit of a disagreement, and there was a bit of heated arguing going on, but they were all right, but nothing's fallen out. But it actually can really wobble that child, and then that child's like rushed off to school, ushered in as though nothing's ever happened, but it's going on. So that was the kind of like basic stuff that was happening. But a lot of not just teachers, but teaching staff didn't grasp that. So that child then has a really bad day because they're not able to cope. So when I was trying to get my son to school, I had to get him in the car. Well, I had to get him up to start with when he didn't want to go, because and I later realised once it was all over that I was almost feeding him to the lions. Yeah, which was quite hard to, there was a lot of guilt that I felt over that. He felt uncomfortable wearing school shoes because of his sensory issues, but there was no leeway with it. The textures of the clothes that he had to wear. So all of those were like a battle. Yeah. Before we even stepped out of the house, and then to get him in the car, and then the journey because everything was rushed then, and I'm panicking because I know I've got to get him to the bus stop for a certain time, and sometimes I'm chasing the bus down the prom, and then I have to get him on the bus. Not all the time was successful, because sometimes the bus driver just wouldn't wait for him. And then I'd have to make a decision of whether, I actually drove him to school, or I just gave it up as a bad job. And then, so after I've done all that, eventually he gets to school, and he's very heightened with anxiety before he's even started anything. And there was a complete lack of understanding about that. So I knew ultimately that I was going to end up with a phone call at some point, or more than one, to either go and pick him up or speak to him on the phone, or occasionally he'd run out of school, you know, all that kind of thing. Yeah. So I feel like I've gone off track a little bit now. One thing leads to another, doesn't
it? What do you wish you could change about parenting in general, as in for everyone?
Oh gosh. I just wish there wasn't as much pressure on the kids, because it that then puts pressure on the parents, and it's not just with school, it's with everything. You know, peer pressure. I mean, we've got social media now, which wasn't a big thing back then. It certainly wasn't a thing at all in my day, or probably yours either, for that matter. So I think we're dealing with something that's just well, it's not easy to navigate at all. So I just wish that there wasn't the pressure there, because children's mental health is suffering hugely, and it's not good, really. I'm actually really relieved that I've only got one left at school now, and he does go to a specialist school that are very able to support him well, and it's brilliant. But I'm really relieved that we're away from mainstream school, because I don't think that, well, I know that the youngest wouldn't have been able to manage being in mainstream, but how any child can manage in mainstream school, I don't know. It's just and that's what puts the pressures on parents. So that's probably the one thing.
And it's like, even as you were like answering the last question, we're so governed by time. Everything is got to be here for this time, and then there's this. It's so rigid, and there's not really much flexibility in anything, is there? It's all so structured, and that works for some, but it doesn't work for everyone. There's no sort of balance, is there?
No, and I don't know how you get that. In my opinion, schools are too big. There's no room for children to grow and evolve into who they need to be, and to celebrate that, either, because every child is put into the same square box.
Yeah, they're just a number, aren't they?
And there's just no space for them to grow. You know, how can you expect every child to work academically the same? You can't. No. Teachers know this. It's not their fault, really, that we're in this state. The whole system needs to be rejigged, and they need to come up with something quite drastic, I believe, to pull it back round. I have no idea what it'll be like in another 5-10 years. It's quite scary.
Yeah, it's very scary.
Yeah, and you've got younger children, so I imagine that is a scary thought.
Yeah, it is. I just wanted to ask one more question, going right back to the start, where you when you did your introduction. So you said that your parents divorced when you were 13. Do you feel that I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine, but do you feel like that affected you as a child and as a parent?
Yes. Yeah, it definitely affected me as a child. Because I remember it quite vividly as well. I felt ashamed of my mum and dad.
Right.
And I didn't want them to. I really felt that imbalance. It rocked my world as a child. And I was lucky, because my mum and dad, they did pull together, and they did co-parent us really well.
Yeah.
in the circumstances, because they did come from very different, you know, as I said, my dad was very dominant and my mum was very soft. But it, you know, I suppose it kind of like did work. But it was really difficult. And my brother actually did go to we lived with my mum all of the time, and then my brother did go to live with my dad when he was about 14.
Right.
Very similar things that have happened to me as well. So I knew that when my divorce broke down that it was going to impact my children.
Yeah.
My ex-husband, he didn't come from a broken family, and I don't think he had any idea of how much it would impact them. And I wanted more than anything for it not to, because it was going to, you know, however we did it, it was going to impact on them. But I wanted it to be as little as possible. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. And that there's nothing that I could have done about that. I did what I could. Yeah. Around that, there's lots of things which, you know, this perhaps isn't the right time to go into, but I think there's lots of things that we could have done differently to support them, but we didn't. It was definitely me on my own against it, you know, the dad, and vice versa. It wasn't like let's put our differences aside to make sure our kids are all right. It wasn't that situation at all, and that's very, very frustrating. I wish it could have been a lot different for them, and I hope that you know, when my boys come to have their own families, that they take all that into consideration as well. You know, you wouldn't want your child to go. I didn't want my kids to go through a broken home. I didn't, you know, I got married with the intention of it being forever, but it does impact on them a lot, and kids blame themselves. They take it on board and think, what, you know, is it something that I've done? I just felt really embarrassed, because at that time there wasn't many parents divorcing. All my friends' parents were still together. Yeah. And I felt a bit like the odd one out, whereas nowadays it's quite a popular thing, isn't it, for your parents to be divorced or not together. And
again, you don't have to answer if you
don't
want to, but how do you find, were you close with your mum? How do you find sort of parenting without your mum? Because I know there's a lot of stuff in the media and all that, and it's very much like, my mum's such a like big role model, and she's always there to support me. And you know, like in parenting stuff, it's very much, you tend to find mums are supported by their mums and that kind of narrative. How have you found that?
Well, I now realise that I don't parent like either of my parents anymore. And I've found my own way of parenting, probably because of having the boys that are on the spectrum, because you have to parent them differently. There's no two ways about that. But as you get older and you look back at your parents, I mean, when you're younger, you think that they're fantastic, don't you? You're like, you know, and that's how it should be, and it should always be like that. I'm touching wood that my boys look at me like that when they get older, that, you know, they think that I did a good job, and they wouldn't change a thing, but I'm sure that they won't. But as you get older, and I've looked back at my own parents, I didn't want to be that, have that their parenting style. But my mum was a good support. I don't think she found parenting herself very easy. I think she struggled. But she was the type of woman that would never ask for help or support either. So You know, I think she was a plodder. And we did have our ups and downs and our difficulties. And I do miss her because she was a good grandma to my boys. I don't think that she could ever offer me any great parenting advice. And I don't ever remember her actually doing that.
Yeah.
But she was there if I needed her, you know. She if she could, she would. I mean, she helped with school pickups and when I was working, and she'd babysit, and she did genuinely like spending time with them, which was great. And I never felt like I was putting on her because she always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, she's died and I can't change anything about that. I just wish that she'd have had more time to spend with Joshua, because he was only little when she passed away. You know, I think she missed out on an awful lot, but yeah. Does that answer what you say?
Yeah, I think so. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow, review and share with other parents you know. I release a new episode every Monday, and you can now listen on all podcast apps: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts and YouTube. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please get in touch via any of my social media channels, website or email. Thank you, Wendy, for joining me on today's podcast. It's been great to have you, and thank you to everyone for listening.